Postscript to Chapter 13. In the book by Dr. Larry M. Van Hook, The Fourth Wall, the author has Ariel, the teacher angel, attempting to explain to the main character that at the bottom of reality, or the grand narrative, there is evidence of its mental or ideal nature. This was a mere passing dialogue, so let us break it down a bit more in this video. Some excellent summaries I recommend are found on YouTube. How Self-Referential Paradoxes Break Reality by Thought Academy. What if the universe is math? By PBS Spacetime. How do you know what you know? By Up and Atom. And finally, Math's Fundamental Flaw. Also, there are similar themes made by Douglas Hofstadter in his book Gödel, Escher, Bach, 1979. I haven't read this book as I only discovered it recently, but it seems to convey some useful ideas. All the links and citations are in the description. Let's break it down by starting with a proposed underpinning of math from the book. Since math is the fundamental language of understanding the nature of things, it also serves as an ontological syntax of reality. Remember here that we are being very primitive about reality. First, we offer some fundamental definitions. Definition. A thing for our argument is an indeterminate subject. We use the word thing very broadly here without reference to specific ontological status. A thing for our purposes is just a subject. It is not assumed that it must be material or immaterial. Definition. A background is a thing or set of things. Context. A background can be a thing or a set of things, but it is that which is always the object of the subject, a reference point. It is interchangeable with things depending only on the reference point. Definition. Difference is the standing out of a thing from its background and other things. The definition of difference depends on the relationship between a thing and a background. It is not merely a contrast, as in the vernacular, but any noticeable distinction between the thing and the background. In this sense, two things can be similar, but still different. Difference is how the thing stands out, arises from, or is separate from a background, even if that background is similar. The boundary for difference, however, is if the background and the thing are in every way similar, then they would not be different, but the same. A framed picture of a horse on an otherwise bare white wall is illustrative. The picture stands out from its background. It is noticed. That is the difference. One could also see the wall because of the picture. The standing out of the wall is also difference. Both can be either the thing or the background. It simply depends upon what is being pointed to. This pointing experience is the most fundamental existential choice required with perception. The perceiver decides what to notice. This fundamental aspect of perception is precisely what is being manipulated in common optical illusions and seems to be the focus of the measurement problem in quantum mechanics. Furthermore, what makes a thing stand out or be distinguished from a background is essentially information, because information is fundamentally a distinction. If this is true as we argue, then information is simply a synonym for difference. This idea was not lost on some philosophers or other thinkers, especially semanticists and linguists like Alfred Korzybski, July 3, 1879, March 1, 1950, and Gregory Bateson, the 9th of May, 1904, the 4th of July, 1980. From their work, we get the famous phrase regarding information as differences that make a difference. Bruce Kodish wrote, "Difference qualifies as one of the most important fundamental undefined terms in the non-Aristotelian worldview that Alfred Korzybski delineated. In a world where the premise of non-identity rules, the world we actually seem to live in, where no two objects, however similar, are exactly the same in all respects, difference indeed seems fundamental." See the citation in the description. However, we argue that difference is not mere semantics, but a fundamental property of existence. Without difference, nothing would be noticeable, directed to the mind, nor conceivable in the mind. Hence, its practicality for language is derived from its fundamental nature in both information and existence. Indeed, differences that make a difference is a phrase befitting many fundamental tenets of quantum information theory and the emergence of quantum computing. Since there is a blurring between information, existence, and difference, we argue the following definitional corollary. Difference is information quantified, and difference is existence qualified. One is computation, and the other is consciousness. It is the unity between quantity and quality. Math, for example, is the computation of the qualia of difference, and existence is the consciousness of the quantity of difference. When we think, we are analyzing what we experience. This is apparent. It is also apparent that when we are conscious of things, we notice quantity. We do not just see the cows in a pasture generally. We see numerous cows specifically. We see quantity. Subjective experience and shared objective experience, we argue, are dependent upon this definition of difference. Let's look at the related definition. Definition. Differentiation is the process of noticing difference. That is the ability to point out a thing. Since difference encapsulates both the subject and object, the subjective and objective, it would make sense that the process of perceiving difference would involve both logic, the computation, and experience, the sense data, or subjective experience. Logic is fundamentally about making distinctions. Even the law of identity or tautology makes a distinction between 2 points of reference. A equals A means that a distinction is a false one, but nonetheless holds a distinction against the background within the mind to express that idea in the first place. Sameness denotes oneness or mere similarity. It does not remove differentiation if any background can be referenced. Of course, the law of contradiction and excluded middle refer directly to differentiation. A thing cannot stand out and not stand out at the same time. Since differentiation is a process of noticing a difference, it can be expressed as being mindful, which leads us to the next definition. Definition. A mind is at a minimum a thing that is or is capable of being mindful. That is differentiation. We argue that this definition, if correct, implies several ideas from the previous definitions. 1. A mind is aware or mindful when it receives information. 2. A mind is thinking or computing when it uses information to differentiate things from their backgrounds, and then decides what to do with the results. For example, deciding to eat their prey, conclude the answer to a math problem, flee a predator, reply to a question, etc. However, what makes some minds, if not all minds, different is the potential of a mind to simultaneously be both a background and a thing. In other words, a mind may be self-referential. It can be mindful of itself and differentiate itself. In summary, a mind must be aware, thoughtful, and directive. We might add that because of these facts, a mind is always subject to any object. Now, let's take these ideas a step further and apply them more broadly to existence. Definition. Existence is when differentiation occurs. That is, existence is difference. In other words, a thing exists only if it can be noticed, if a difference can be inferred or experienced. If this differentiation is inferred as possibility, then the background of the thing is imagination. It still exists in the mind as a thing. Therefore, if differentiation does not occur, we cannot say a thing exists. This definition entails the following inferences. 1. If a thing, A, cannot be distinguished from the background or is identical to the background, it, A, cannot be said to exist. 2. If one thing, A, is differentiated, it may be or become the background for another thing, B, so that differentiation is a mutually inclusive relationship. 3. Anything that can be referred to exists because referring to a thing is indistinguishable from differentiation of a thing. 4. If something cannot be referred to, it does not exist until such a time a reference can be made, called the idealist inference. In other words, we can say something exists when we discover it. 5. Multiplicity is the essence of existence. Infinite sameness is nothing, therefore multiplicity is everything. No difference means no existence. Even the word nothing has no meaning without the idea of something to differentiate it. Someone may object that this last definition begs the question, as many ontological arguments are apt to do. Are we defining existence in a way that assumes what we are trying to prove? Admittedly, existence as a concept has a self-referential quality as seen by Cartesian doubt. That is, I think therefore I am. When we say, a thing does not exist, we have already pointed to a thing by making it the subject of the sentence, and pointing to a thing means it exists in our understanding. In this, we bite the bullet when we admit that the proposition, X does not exist, is never a true statement, since the ontological status of X may be differentiated by imagination within the mind. If X is a nonsensical word, then X is also nonsensical. Are we framing the understanding of existence as ontologically dependent on mind by assuming that is the case? If things exist without reference to mind, in what way? Really, the counter-conclusion is that a thing may exist without us knowing it. It sounds like common sense, but it is a self-referential paradox. If the above statement is true, then we claim a thing exists, but don't know it. If we don't know it, then we cannot claim that it exists. If the statement is false, then we claim that a thing may not exist without us knowing it. However, if something does not exist in the first place, there is nothing to know. In the end, we cannot separate our knowledge of a thing from the thing itself. The materialist must accept the statement that a thing may exist without us knowing it, while an idealist will reject this claim. So, we make this bold claim based on our definitions. If a thing differentiates itself, that thing is a mind or an extension of a mind, such as computers and particle detectors. This self-referential qualia is exclusive to mental states. It differs from a feedback loop in that a feedback loop is passive. A mirror facing a mirror creates an endless reflection of itself, but that reflection is detected by the observer, not the mirror. The observer is a mind, and as it increasingly seems from quantum mechanics, is necessary for existence. The collapse of the wave function within quantum mechanics is when an observer or the observer's mind extensions, such as recorders or detectors, differentiate the particle from its background. The measurement problem is differentiation and is perfectly consistent with the idealist worldview, but problematic for the materialist worldview. Mental constructs all reflect this self-referential quality. Logic has paradoxes, logical contradictions, and certain modal arguments that are self-referential. Experience can have self-referential qualities too, with optical and auditory illusions, interoception, and Descartes' experience of not doubting his own experience of doubting. Even mathematics, long held to be the bastion of certainty, was proven by Kurt Gödel to be self-referential with his incompleteness theorem using a technique known as Gödel numbering. The fact that logic, math, and experience all differentiate themselves only confirms that they are mind or extensions of mind. What about the universe? Doesn't it also differentiate itself through human minds alone? The universe is self-referential. Since the universe differentiates itself, the universe is a mind or an extension of a mind. We are not concerned about panpsychism or such complications right now. The goal is to argue that reality is ideal, not material. Notice also that positing a material substance behind our perceptions is not necessary, but an unnecessary multiplicity of causes per Occam's razor. Material substance is the same as saying, a thing may exist without us knowing it. One may be surprised to know that there is a way to prove whether a thing may exist without us knowing it. John Clauser, Alan Aspect, and Anton Zeilinger shared the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics for doing just that. When a particle is entangled with another particle, they seem to influence each other at a distance, so that an effect on one immediately affects the other. If it could be proved that the particles carried hidden information or some variable that allowed for this spooky action at a distance, then something may indeed exist without us knowing it, because it has been at a fundamental level before we discovered it. However, these physicists demonstrated the opposite. The universe at the quantum level is not real, that is not independent of observation. We hope this helps explain what Ariel is getting at with our main character in Dr. Van Hook's The Fourth Wall.